Hey, welcome to VTS47. I'm Keith. Decided to bust out the camera this month. Been a couple of months since I've used it. Anyways, good to have you. Hope you're doing well. Hope 2009 has treated you well so far. Hope everything's cool in your world. Um, we're gonna wrap up a scene we've been animating here for probably about 4 or 5 months now, and it's about time I finished it, don't you think? Yeah. Anyways, I've been going through a scene and. This month we're going to go ahead and polish it up. Now what I'm going to do is a little bit something a little bit different. Um, a subscriber, Josh, he suggested that it's kind of dull watching you animate. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a kind of a dull guy, but so what I'm going to do in the interest of kind of speeding things along so that we're not quite so pedantic about everything is I'm going to speed up what I'm working on, by twice the speed. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm recording myself animating the desktop without me doing the webcam or anything like that, and I'm just going to speed it up and I'm going to talk about it, kind of give a voiceover narration, just kind of hitting the high points, describing what I'm working on, what I'm doing, and if necessary talking about particular techniques or something I'm thinking of at the time when I'm working on it. That way I can kind of move quickly, finish the scene at a speed that's more to my liking, because if I spend a lot of time talking about it, as some of you have noted, I tend to repeat myself a bit too much. It just comes from talking to a camera and not having another person here going, oh yeah, I get that. Since I don't have somebody here going, yeah, I get that. That's a good, or I don't quite understand that. I end up explaining myself to a camera 15 times. So anyways, we're going to try that this month, and moving forward, we'll probably continue on that. We'll reuse this technique a few more times as needed. So anyways, without any further jibber jabber on my part or filling words, let's go ahead and just get in there and pick it up. And I'm going to start cleaning up this scene, and just so you know, I finished the scene. At the end you get a rendered version of it. Kind of cool, huh? Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look.
Okay, first thing I do here is I set all these curves to, I select all the controllers and I set the tangents from linear to spline. I use a tool called Auto Tangent from Michael Comet. It's available on High-End 3D. It's free. What it does is it applies splines, but it does it in a way that's intelligent so that the spline doesn't just overshoot and you get these really sloppy, kind of swimmy splines, but it applies a smart level of it adapts the tangents so that they don't overshoot. It's kind of like better than clamped. It's like what clamped should be but isn't. So it's pretty cool. What I do is I work from the hips on out. My belief is that you get that primary platform working, and you get it working well. So it starts with the hips. Everything, if it's attached to the hips, if there's a hitch in the hips, you'll see it everywhere else. So I start with the hips and I work my way up through the torso and up through the head. That's like the core of the character. You get the core working, everything else kind of goes along for the ride. Now my basic idea when it comes to doing F-curve work, it's twofold. One is I try to make the math kind of flow through the data points in a way that the computer will like. For your typical CG, very smooth style, you're going to have, the smoother that the math flows through a point, the better it is. So if your tangents are a little bit, harsh, if they kind of, if they cut back and forth on themselves, you kind of create this wobble, this noise in the F curve, and that noise. On one channel, a little bit of a frame here, a tenth of a thing here, or an eighth of a thing there as far as units and stuff, or maybe a half a degree here and there. It doesn't seem like much, but if you have, 40 controllers and, on average 5 to 6 channels on each, you're talking 200 channels or so. And if they're not clean, then you end up with just all that noise adds up. It's like, what's a penny? Well, a penny's nothing, but if you got 2,000 pennies, that's $200, So each one of these little tweaks, it just makes the motion that much smoother, it makes it tighter, it brings it up a level in professionalism. And so attention to how the data flows through these curves is important. Now what you're seeing me do here is I am testing out these little valleys. You'll see that the data right here has these peaks and valleys in it, and these were introduced when I was doing my drawing. I was just making the drawings work. And for the most part, I'm pretty good about getting the math to work okay, but sometimes in creating a drawing, I will introduce data like this that it makes a difference in how the drawing looks, but it might also make the computer work a little bit too hard getting into and out of something, going from one pose to the next. And so I might be asking the computer to do something that it's gonna bark at me about later on. So whenever I have these peaks, whenever these weird things show up in an F curve, I go through and I test to make sure that I absolutely need that peak, or that valley, that thing that's just standing outside of the norm. And the way I test it is I grab the key itself in the graph editor, and I shift it around, and I see what happens in the viewport. Like right here, this is one that I test, and I'm like, no, I need to keep that. So I don't take it out, even though it looks like a mistake in the curve there. The curve does not flow smoothly from the peak down into the valley. There's like that little hitch along the way. I need that hitch to get the kind of motion I want. And I just double test that to make sure it works. I'm kind of explaining. I deleted a couple of keys and tweaked the tangent to smooth it out. The yellow is the noisy original, the blue is the cleaned up secondary, and really what I'm trying to do there is just keep things flowing through those data points as clean as possible. And again, it adds up. It really does add up quite a bit. I'm kind of running into, being able to, I can't see things too well here, so I'm using a little tool called Zoomify Light. It's another free tool from High-End 3D. It allows you to restage your camera non-destructively. So this way I'm able to keep my graph editor on top and see what I'm doing down below, so that way I'm not destroying anything without being able to see it. Because I always need to, whenever I work in the graph editor, I work while I have the viewport right next to it. I don't work the graph editor on another monitor because it's easy to get lost over there. Everything you do in the graph editor, everything you do with these F curves, you have to test it against what you're doing. Like right here, no, I got to keep that. So I don't get rid of it. Everything you do, you have to test it. If it's a major move anyways, test it against the viewport to make sure that you're not destroying things. Now what I will do is occasionally you'll see me take a key and delete it in the middle of a move. Like right here, I took that key out and took one out of the X, and I'm taking this one out of the Z. It was because I felt like that particular move with the chest was just a little too sharp. Stylistically, it wasn't fitting. If it were, if I were doing something a little cartoonier, a little more stop motiony, I wouldn't mind it being a little sticky right there. But I'm trying to go for something a little more, Pixar-ish, I guess, for lack of a better word, a little more smooth, a little more polished. So I'm going to soften up that move a little bit, and I try to do it in a way that doesn't violate the move itself. I'm not reinventing the move. I'm just kind of playing around with the spacing of it to make sure that it isn't quite so sticky. I don't like things being flat. When a curve comes up, like there's a harsh corner, so I'm going to soften that a bit, and I'm going to soften that a bit and get rid of that one so that the move is the same. I'm just making it a little bit softer. Here again, I'm going to test to make sure that that valley is something I need. I don't think it is, so I got rid of it. And I kind of circle it to kind of point out that that's, I'm testing it from the graph editor and seeing it, and then seeing what I'm doing right there in the viewport. It's really important to do that. And again, just softening these moves. It's all about just letting the data flow through there. There's a lot of times, like right after this, there's a couple of keyframes here at the end. I'm just going to blow them away. I don't need them. They're not really defining anything. They're just there, and they're opportunities to introduce more noise. So in the end, I only have the curves that I need. I only have the points I need. That's an example of how I kind of soften both of those moves. Um, but if a point is not really defining the curve in an important sort of way, I get rid of it. Um, because I don't need all that data in there to make things difficult. Yes, when I do my drawing style of animation, I do create a lot of drawings. Here's a little mountain I'm going to get rid of. Um, I do create a lot of drawings, and that results in a lot of keys on a lot of controllers. Some of those keys actually don't really do anything, or they do very, very little. And that's fine. Back in the drawing stage, I don't really care about it because it's more important to me that I capture the essence in what I'm doing in that idea of a drawing. But when it gets to cleanup time, right here in the F curves, it's all about letting the computer play nice with the math as it goes through. Computers are pretty finicky. Um, so right there is a little bit of a hitch. Now I've tested that hitch and I cannot take it out. I don't want to take it out because if I do, then I'm going to sacrifice something in the motion that I had already built. So you have to know what you've built and you have to know what you want. So when you get in here to the F curves, you don't just get blind and go down into a valley and just get lost cleaning up curves without really seeing what you're doing. It's easy to do. That's why I don't work with my F-curve editor and another monitor. I always keep it right there so I can double check things. It's easy to act like, oh, we're going to film the F-curve editor, but we don't film the F-curve editor. We film what's in the camera view. So really most of this is just adjusting things, softening up some of those hits so that they're not quite so sticky, so that they fit that kind of polished CG film style that is very employable. Here I want this to kind of come up a little bit different, so I'm kind of playing around with how the head kind of comes up. So a lot of the function in through here that I'm gonna, I'm not gonna narrate everything specifically for you. I've kind of gone over the basics of what I'm trying to do. Is really just to get the head cleaned up. I've spent a lot of time on the head because in this whole movement, if you remember from previous videos, the way the head moved, the arc of it, the patterns of motion, the shapes as they went, I spent a lot of time on it, and I'm still going to spend a lot of time on it. And you'll find that when your animation is planned out and you have like a hierarchy of what you're trying to accomplish, then things, they make more sense when it comes time to cleaning up. You're not going to spend 5 hours cleaning up something that just doesn't have any meaning. You find what's important, you spend your time on what's important. The rest of this stuff, as long as it doesn't draw attention to itself, for the most part you can just kind of make it work and you don't have to sweat it like super crazy. There's kind of like this strange religion, that you have to sweat every single detail, and I suppose it's true, but I say sweat the details that are important and screw the rest of them. That's just, it's like yes, you can clean every single corner of your house all the time, but you also want to have a life, so you save the really deep cleaning for a couple of times a year, or you hire help. But for the most part, here's something. I made an adjustment to the timing of his head move right there, and the way it kind of came down. I wanted that to be a little bit softer, but I couldn't do it in just one channel. I couldn't just get rid of some keys in one channel and then ignore the other ones, because that's going to create like a hitch. Whenever you have like one channel doing one thing at its own time and another channel doing its own thing at another time, especially for rotations, it's really noticeable, and it feels sloppy and computery. So now there's times where you do want to offset, channels doing different things, but for the most part, I try to make sure if I'm going to change the timing of something that's especially rotation, I try to make it work in all the available channels that are important. Here I'm just cleaning up the neck, just kind of softening some of these ins and outs. Um, you know, the neck, I didn't really use it very much in the animation, so it's just really a matter of kind of easing it so it doesn't stick too hard when it gets in and out of things. Um, Cleaning up the shoulder. The shoulder isn't really a major important part of the scene, so I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. This is just general housekeeping right here. You know, cleaning up tangents, making sure stuff flows through, getting rid of mountains or valleys that aren't necessary. Um, you know, I try to keep the tangent handles on both sides of the curve if at all possible. Just lets it flow through smoother. Here's some, you know, keys that really I didn't need. They weren't doing anything. Um, so I got rid of them. There, soften that a bit. And then right here is going to be some keys that I don't need. I'm just going to kill these. Because, you know, it's just not an important part of the performance, so I can burn through it pretty quick. And these are all redundant keys on the feet, so I'm just going to kill those. I could just leave them, but you know, to me, I like keeping things, you know, clean. So I'm at a cleanup stage, so let's clean things up. Here I'm playing with the heel lift on his right foot. I want to keep that knee from popping. Popping knees in CG are pretty bad, so I'm just trying to keep that heel raising just enough to keep his knee a tiny little bit bent the whole time, so that way it doesn't pop in and out real bad. So that's really the point there. And this right here, this is, I started cleaning up and I realized, wait a second, this is so small. It's from 0 to minus 0.001. It's like 1/100th of a unit. So it's like no significant value whatsoever. So I just stopped cleaning it. I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to waste my time on this. Um, you know, it was some change that was so minuscule. I'm like, screw it. Um, I've actually had scenes get approved for film that I actually totally forgot to do everything you're watching right now. Where they were linear, and oh, here's something. There's the penetration of the head in the door right there. So I'm going to adjust the door opening so that we don't have that geometry penetration, because that stuff will get sent back to you in a film studio. If you don't work out your penetrations, you're gonna have problems, because they'll just, your shots will come back to you, and while you're still working on other shots, you're gonna get your own shots back. They may have a cleanup department, but that they might actually ruin your animation or totally butcher it in order to get things from not poking through. So do your homework and you know, clean up your own geometry penetrations. Here I wanted to do a little bit of polish on the door. I wanted it to open just a little bit more and kind of overshoot and come back when he opens it. And then when he leans forward, I want it to kind of close a bit, like it, you know, like he's kind of leaning on the door, and as he leans, the door moves. It's a little piece of polish that I didn't plan it or anything like that. I didn't put it into the drawings when I put them together, but it's important. You know, this is what polish is for. You add these little pieces of life, and kind of going back to that thing where everything's, you know, I got shots approved that were linear. Here's just my little thing where I hate things to be flat. I don't want them to just be the same value, because it's not life. So anyways, I've had scenes where I just turned them in and I got an approval in the morning, and then I got going on my next scene and I forgot to actually go through everything you're seeing here with this whole, you know, spline polishing business. My stuff was so well put together and linear, it just didn't need it. And so if your shots were working when the tangents are linear, everything you're seeing right here is just gravy. And here I'm trying to make the doorknob work and I forgot I didn't rig it. So it's really, it's important to build stuff in a hierarchical way that you know, if the scene works, when it's linear, all the stuff I'm doing here, most of it is really just, it's like sandpaper. You know, the cabinet is there. I'm not working with chisels and drills here. I'm working with sandpaper. Now here's what I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to really zoom in here. I'm going to really track this head arc. I spend a lot of time on this head arc in previous videos because to me it's important. The audience is almost always watching a character's eyes. Everything else they feel, but the eyes they watch. So what I'm trying to do here is make sure that when it moves that the arcs are as clean as they can be. And so I'm using my little Annotate Pro tool to kind of mark its way through there, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here making sure this is as clean as it needs to be. Now I don't like this position right here. I don't like it very much at all, so I'm actually, the great thing about Annotate Pro is you can actually move the dot. And now I'm selecting the head, and I'm just going to try and find whatever channel is necessary to move his head so that his eyes kind of line up with that dot. Whoop, there it is. That's what I like. So I clean that one up. And then there's one right there I don't like. I feel like it kind of kicks in a little bit. I want it to be over to the left a touch. So I grab the dot and move it kind of like where I want it to be. It's like dry erase you can move, which is the best thing in the world. So it gives me something to aim for. And so now I'm just going to adjust the X channels. Now the thing is, you got to be careful when you do this that you don't mess up what was, you know, what it was doing the frame before or the frame after. And so in this instance, I want to set one key just on the X channel right here, because anything I was doing to the key around it was messing up the frame before and the frame after. So I'm just put a little bit of a key there so that I can keep where I was the frame before and where I'm at the frame after, and I can just make this one frame work. Now that introduces another little valley or little notch right there in the F curve, but it's one I want, so I'm not worried about it. So here I've got I got it all worked out. It's nice and clean, and that's important because that's what's on screen. This right here, this is not so clean. Okay, it's got kind of got some wobbles and stuff that at first glance you might say I got to get rid of that stuff, but I tested everything in there. It's not clean, but it's right. I know every key is doing exactly what I want it to do, but on top of that, the way the math is going, you know, the way the tangents are going into and out, it's important to make sure that works okay. Here there's a little pop on the hand. It's behind the door, but I'm taking it out so that I don't have any motion blur issues. It's okay if it slides a little bit. That doesn't bother me because I don't see it. I just didn't want it to do that really nasty pop right there. The point of cleaning up your F curves is not necessarily get rid of every mountain and peak, but to make sure that every mountain and peak has a purpose. And if it doesn't, then get rid of it. And all the tangents are really just about letting that curve flow smoothly in through those data points.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
Alright, so I got everything working just the way I wanted. Now what I want to do here is I want to plus it. I've got the whole thing working real smooth. It took me about 40, maybe 45 minutes to clean up the entire body performance from the linear stage, which was really, it didn't take me, you know, what was the linear stage from the last video? Maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes after the timing stage. So I'm going from, you know, working these drawings to cleaning up F curves and polishing out the scene in no time at all. So what I want to do here is I want to add a little plus. I want to play around with the head. I want to give it like a little head waggle and really just change the flavor. Not a ton, but I want to just give it a little bit more attitude here. And that's just, you know, something I thought of here as I was cleaning it up. I thought, okay, great. I cleaned this thing up and it's really nicely done. And it's real solid. Now I got through that pretty quick. I want to play around a little bit. And so what I'm going to do here is try and add just a little bit of extra head rotation on the way up and on the way down. So it's just got a little bit more attitude. Now, I didn't build this into my drawings, and that's fine. What I got working was real solid. So now I've got time. If I'm spending days doing F-curve cleanup, I'm not in a position where I have a lot of freedom. I'm just trying to get what I have working. That's one of the best benefits I've found so far of working in this drawing paradigm is I'm free. I spend a lot of time on the drawings and make sure that they work together. My timing, by taking it in a pencil shooter sort of way, my timing is easier to deal with. I spread it out and I really think about it and try to be quick about it. So then I just throw everything over to linear, just do a few little things here and there. I mean, if you take a look at VTS46, you see from timing to to linear in betweens, it's not very much. So it doesn't take me a ton of time to get this stuff in shape, and then 45 minutes or an hour to clean up the F curves. The body performance is done. Now what I got is some time to play around. I can do some things. I can try some different stuff. And so what I'm going to do here is, you see me just I do some scrubbing here and playing around with the F curves, and I pretty significantly change the shape of some of those head rotation curves, but it's all part of trying to get it just a little piece of attitude, and it's because I'm free. I've already got the scene working. If I get this and I don't like it, well, I can always just go back to the one that's already cleaned up and works. So this is like gravy on the mashed potatoes. I can play around my sandbox here and try some different ideas and get this thing working in a way that I think will add just a little bit of it'll just make it cooler. So spending a lot of time really just on these rotation channels to get that little head waggle right there. And you'll see when I'm done with this the play blast of it. I really like it. It's just it just pluses things a bit. And I've had some people say, well, gosh, the way you work, it's like you add so many keys, you back yourself into a corner. And it's not like I add so many keys, it's just the ones I add really mean something. And then I do spend a lot of my time in the F-curve editor cleaning that stuff out, but it doesn't take hardly any time to rip it out. F-curve editor is your sandpaper. If you're building cabinetry, you use your drill and your saw and your router for the big stuff, and you use sandpaper for sanding. F-curve editor is sandpaper. It's really hard to make a chair out of a piece of wood and nothing but sandpaper. You need saws and drills, and that's what the drawings are for. So I'm getting pretty close to liking this. Just a few more tweaks and stuff like that. It's always good to have a fast rig if possible, so you can just kind of test things out. Sometimes I scrub more, sometimes I scrub less.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
Alright, so I got that head waggle working the way I want, so now what I'm going to do here is just get the lip sync in shape. Now as I went back, if you're following this scene from the beginning, I built some of these mouth shapes, these emotional mouth shapes, to kind of roughly coincide with what the sound is going to be like at that particular moment in the drawing. But of course the timing back then is guesstimated, so I just kind of getting close. Now here's where I've got the body cleaned up, I've actually plussed things up a little bit, and so now I'm in a position where I can really kind of I made a mistake here, selected the hips, so I got to undo some stuff, but I'm in a position where I can really start working on the lip sync and getting it timed up the proper way and making it work. So I will try to use what I built before and shuffle it around so it's in the right place and time. And I make notes to myself as to what frame is what sound. And it also helps you guys following along at home. And so sometimes the shapes are not going to work because I built them to work from a particular view, and now they're in a different point in time, so the mouth is being seen from a different angle. It's the way I look at lip sync is it's really important to understand that speech is not a mechanical issue. I mean, there are mechanics of speech going on, you know, shapes of the lips and the tongue and all these other things, but in animation, speech is an emotional thing. So the shapes have to reflect the emotion. I think as long as you get your mouth open and closed and your wides and narrows on the right timing, if you everything after that's all about emotion. I don't really kill myself about really getting nutty about polishing lip sync to the point where I'm like, you know, tracking every little controller and making sure that it's just, you know, you can do that if you've got all the time in the world. If you want to go home at, you know, in a decent hour and put your kids to bed, then you learn how to prioritize. And for me, emotion is the number one thing here, to communicate what's going on behind the speech, not the speech itself. So here it's just a matter of going in and finding what needs to be there. I will always, whenever possible, if I need to take a sound from another point, I copy it and then I adjust it. If I have a lip sync or a phoneme library built for me for a scene, I'll throw the library shape in there, but then tweak it. It's always about unique shapes. I don't use the same oo twice. I don't use the same M twice. I don't use the same F twice. I just can't do it because every time you make an M sound, you are not feeling the same way. You're not saying the same thing. You're not making the same point. So libraries and borrowed shapes, those are starting points, but they are not the end of the road. It's important to build everything out in a unique way so that your character feels alive. Because, you know, when you say, you know, whatever, I mean, whatever you're saying, you're not going to have the same shapes the whole time. We're not robots, okay? Here I'm holding this oo shape for two or three frames, and I make sure that the second one is on a consonant, a closed consonant. I always go from a closed to a slightly more closed. So if it's an oo or an M or a P or an F or something like that, the first one is most of the way there, and the next one is more there. Okay, and here we have kind of the opposite, where he's going from wa into want. It was too linear. There was no definition to it. So what I did right here is I built some definition into how his jaw moves and stuff right there, but it's a bit too tight. It kind of sticks open, and then closes too fast. So I'm going to kind of ease this a little bit. I have a hotkey thing here that kind of does the same thing as the tween machine, and it just kind of nudges it towards the key that's after it. I don't trying to just ease some of these things up so it isn't quite so sticky. Now there's a little sound right here after he says want. There's like an exhaling there, so I'm going to try and capture that here in a second. But I'm just kind of going through and just making sure that I'm hitting the timing the way I want. So here's that breath release on want, and I'm going to try and capture it. It's a little piece of detail, much like the door and, you know, the little head waggle. When your scene is, you know, when it comes together well for you and you work in a hierarchy way that really, you know, it just makes sense. To me, workflow is not prison, it's liberation. You know, limitations are, you know, if you have a way of doing things, the stuff just puts me in a position to really find these little pieces of performance. And then, again, these are not little things that I'm going to really spend a lot of time worrying about early on in the scene. If I notice them in my planning, I might make notes of them, but I'm not going to try to solve all those things early on. You kind of have to have an ability to know what's big and important and work your way in. It's like when you're making a sculpture, you know, or a painting. Let's say you got a canvas that's you know, 4 foot by 5 feet. You know, that's a pretty big canvas. You don't go from a 6-inch brush down to a 1/2-inch brush, and you certainly don't start with a 1/2-inch brush. Yeah, making notes. I don't want a linear slide. After his mouth is open, I don't want it to just kind of slide, in a sloppy sort of way, slide closed. I want it to be open, hold it open a little bit, and then close. And then when he closes it, I don't want it to just slide close. I want it to kind of ease into being closed. I build eases into just about everything I can, so it doesn't just slide from point A to point B in a real sloppy way. And by building those eases with keys, I'm not getting cheap. I'm not letting the F curve do my work for me. There's a sharp pop on the T, and I want to hold it for a little bit. So anyhow, just getting into those, it's just liberating when you are able to come at this. I'm just playing right now. I mean, this stuff is, and I'm not really talking about a huge piece of effort here. I mean, we're looking at 9-10 minutes in runtime, so I'm basically doing all the lip sync here in about 20 minutes on this scene, and it's going to be polished out. How many scenes do you do where you get film level lip sync in 20 minutes? And some people say, well, you're cheating. You're not doing your homework. You're not doing enough. I don't know. All my shots get approved, so it's not like I'm cheating or I'm doing something that real film animators don't do that. No, I mean there's this strange worship of the ineffectual. Do things. The little things, you don't worry about the little things if they're not important, but if they are important, worry about them. Here, when he pops his mouth open on the want, I had it at 1 frame and it was too sticky. So I made it 2 frames, but it was not just a linear, 2 frames where the first frame he's 50% of the way there, and then the second frame he's 100% of the way there. It was weighted. The first frame he's like 75% of the way open, and then the last frame he's 100%. So that way it's eased. I mean, like these little micro eases all over the place. Really, that's the key to, I think, to just a lot of the polish is just putting these little tiny micro eases into things, and you're not letting the computer do it for you. More auto tangent, and we're getting ready to play blast this sucker and let you look at it.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
Okay, I felt like the from the ooh of the W and all that stuff felt late by a couple of frames, so I'm just going to nudge it back a bit. And that's actually not too shabby when you stop and think about it. I mean, I did all that lip sync work and I made 1 play blast and I'm off by a couple of frames in 1 section. So I'm just kind of burning through it, but I know what I want to do. I know where I'm at. It's not like this stuff is new to me. So that fix was done. I didn't even feel like I needed to see it. So now I'm working on the brows and the eyes. Again, first thing I do is I select all those controllers, take the curves, switch them from linear into spline using auto tangent. Now, again, working in a hierarchy sort of way. To me, the big thing that's important is the scale of the eyes. If you have a rig where the eyes can scale, I want to make sure that that stuff's working first. I always work in a hierarchy sort of way. The big things first, and then the medium things next, and the little things last. And I do that from the drawing stage right on out through how I polish up a scene. And it's like a Mandelbrot, man. It just every time you start a new task, just start with the biggest part of that task. In this instance, I want to make sure that the shape of the eyes, and their scale, their squash and stretch, times out to really accent the emotion the way I want. And it's, again, blinking and eye shapes and all those things, they're technical. Yes, there is a technical aspect to blinking and to having your eyes, squish and stuff like that. But it's about performance to me. So I make sure that the eye shapes are reading in an emotional sort of way, and that their changes mean something. Like I'm trying to do something where he's squashed on the way up, and I spend some time building those to look the way I want, and getting that exasperated look on the way up. And I'm getting rid of the zombie eye thing right there. Never have a scene, never have a frame where your pupils are gone. Always take the time to make sure that your pupils are there so that you don't have that zombie eye sort of thing. So that's what I'm cleaning up right now. But the shapes of the, the squash and a stretch of the eyes has to play along with the emotion, and it has to get exactly the way I want. So yes, the pupils there, those are details, but they're, I can't worry about those until I have the squashing and stretching working first. The brows, those are important, but I got to make sure that the big things are working first. Now here at the end, I'm going to put a little bit of an eye dart because whenever you look at somebody, you don't always just look right at their face. You ever see that where sometimes people look you up and down? That's what he's got right here. Is he does that little up and down look, like, what are you all about? And so I'm doing the eyes. Eye darts for me are pretty simple little formula where you don't dart in one frame. It darts in 2 frames, and it gets most of the way there in the first frame and then the rest of the way there in the second. Again, it's another one of those micro ease sort of things where you have a 2-frame move, but even there you're easing because that just kind of keeps things from feeling too harsh. Now I'm just going through on the brows. And what I'm going to do here at the end is I'm going to support those eye darts with the brows. What I mean by support is I'm going to have when he darts his eyes, the brows are going to move as well. Not a lot, just a little bit, and not at the exact same time either. They might lead it by a frame or so. Eye darts that aren't supported, to me, they don't have a lot of life. They feel contrived. So whenever I do an eye dart, I'll support it either with a little bit of a brow move, maybe even sometimes a little bit of a head tilt. A tiny little head tilt. We're not talking about a lot here. But just so that it doesn't feel like it's this thing and it's all on its own. And again, whenever you make a move with any part of the body, you want to hold it, even if it's just for a frame or two. And then when you hold it, you don't want to just hold it flat. You want to hold and then get into a slightly more extreme version of what you're holding. That's really the simplest rules of cleanup that I have. Just hold something, get in there and push into a slightly more extreme, ease into things, even if you're only moving something in 2 frames. Don't have things move in isolation, all by themselves, because that's too mechanical. Give them a little support in something. And now I'm just going to play around with the lids a little bit. And in this scene, the lids aren't quite as important. They're just like little polish issues. So I'm just playing around those some and setting some keys. And you'll see most of my work is really not even F-curve based right here. It's really just about making sure the stuff just plays nice. And now if this were a close-up scene, I would spend, I would certainly spend more time being real careful about these F-curves, but for the most part, a lot of times, seeing this far back, it's enough for me to just select all the curves and throw them into spline with auto tangent and be good. But even then, I'll go in there and I'll give them a quick little look over, make sure that they're not too sticky, clean up some of the data, some of the tangents so that they're not quite so junky. But for the most part, on a scene that's set this far back, I'm pretty happy with it. And I just, make it work in a way that it's flowing. Again, it's sweating the stuff that's important and not sweating the stuff that isn't. And the eyes are important and the lids are important, all that stuff, but in this instance, I don't see that the return on your investment of time is not there, not even for on the big screen. It just doesn't make any sense for me to spend a ton of time on something where it's not gonna pay off. Here there is some mountains and some wobble in the brows right there that I don't like it. So I do take the time to clean up what bothers me, but I'm not going through there and just cleaning stuff up just to clean it up. I'm just making sure that everything's playing the way I want it to. I'm just going through one brow controller at a time, just getting rid of some of those little bumps right there, making it play nice, giving it a little overshoot. I tend to be pretty soft with the brows. I don't worry about hitting things quite so tight with it. Brows should move fairly quickly, but I don't mind if they're a little soft as far as how they overshoot and things like that. To me, it keeps the character's face feeling a little looser. So now it's like the final little stages of polishing things now, because this shot's just about done, and when you see the last play blast, it's going to be the last play blast, and that's what it's going to be. It'll give you a render and all that other stuff, and that's pretty much it. So that's the theory, man. It's just work in hierarchy. Here's a little my little head tilt to kind of support that eye dart. Okay, it's not a major thing, but it's enough of something to kind of add some weight to it. So work in hierarchies, test all of your curves, and when you have something that you need, clean it up. If you don't need keys, kill them.
What do you want? What do you want?
Scene's done. Alright, we lived with that one for a little longer than I expected to, but that's okay. I took some time to really explain through a lot of things, and took my time really digging into all the little nitty-gritty details, sometimes a little too much, I think. So what we're going to do from this next month, starting with VTS48, we will be moving a little bit quicker. I won't spend quite so much time explaining everything to the little tiniest detail. And we're going to do something, we're going to shift a little bit. We're going to do another scene, but this one's going to be more physical. It's not going to be acting in place. And we're really going to be concerned about doing something in a way that just brings a lot of physicality to it. Because I want you to see that the workflow that I've developed through the way I think about animation works. It doesn't matter if it's an acting scene or if it's a high action, very physical scene. The concepts apply across the board. It's just a matter of how you see them coming to play. So that's what we're going to look at, and we're going to move a little quicker. I'm not going to take 5 months to do the next scene. We're going to try and get it done in, if possible, 2 or 3 at the most. I'd like to be able to get 3 or 4 scenes done before the end of the year, because I want us to kind of pick up. And if I'm moving too quick, well, then we've kind of gone through this very step by step here with this scene where he's opening the door, and then of course there's dozens of videos before which talk about all these things in more detail. So that's the plan here for 2009, is keep moving forward, move forward with a little bit more speed, and cover things in a way that's in depth but maybe not quite so slow. Okay, so anyways, I hope this helped. I hope this was useful to you, and yeah, be good to be good to each other. Keep animating. Always keep animating. I mean, just a little word of encouragement. Don't get stuck in the studying mode. Okay, I'm running into a lot of folks who send me emails and things, and they're just like endlessly studying, and they're not animating. Gotta animate. Okay, so pick up a scene, pick up a character, open up a program, grab some paper and a pencil, whatever it needs to do, and animate. Okay, don't just sit here and watch, but if you want to get better, there's really no better way than to just do it. Okay, so anyways, you guys, be good. Thanks always, as always, for being great subscribers, and I hope it's a great year for you guys, and God bless.